Geddis. He is Vice President and Executive Director of the international firm of architects and urban designers, the Architects Collaborative Incorporated, usually referred to as TAC. He was made a Fellow of the American Institute of Architects in 1971 for his contribution to the advancement of the profession of architecture. He has many awards for his buildings to his credit. He has served the profession of architecture in many ways. He has chaired the AIA's Internship and Licensing Committee. He has been chairman of the 1970 Host Chapter Boston Convention. He served as president of the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards in 1970 and 71 when the NCARB made its greatest advancements. He was successful in effecting drastic changes in upgrading architectural licensing laws and examinations, and this year he serves as chairman of the International Relations Committee. He also has just been appointed to the National Architectural Accrediting Board. He also serves the environment in his hometown level by being chairman of the planning board, and he has been an active member of that board since 1959 and chairman since 1966. He lives in Chestnut Hill, Massachusetts. He has 3 daughters, all in college at the same time right now. One of them is studying architecture at the University of Pennsylvania. We're very happy to have a teacher of 2 of our faculty here tonight. Bill Geddis.
I'm glad there are a few Democrats here left. Thank you, Charlie. Ladies and gentlemen, you can blame old Jack Wyman here, a TAC alumnus, for inviting me to this party here tonight at Ball State, because I'm quite pleased to be with you here tonight and to renew acquaintances with old friends and people like Larry Richards and to meet some new friends. The role I would like to play is twofold. First, I would like to discuss with you the broader challenges in architecture as I see them, and second, to discuss my firm, the Architects Collaborative TAC, and tell you something about its origins, its philosophy, its people, and its approach to teamwork. And then if these damn slides work, I'd like to show you some case studies, a wide range of projects in the where we have looked into systems building for schools, complicated health facilities, and even a romantic large-scale planning project for the World Bank in Yugoslavia. Before we look at the too limited world of architecture, which most of you are going into, I wish to discuss with you ways whereby we architects, we and some of you future architects, can enlarge our painfully small sphere of influence. Areas where we can increase our scope and become involved with the total environment, because this is the only area to be involved. How then can we achieve these goals of the future? I have a great friend, a prominent educationist, who told me recently that more has happened in his field of education in the last 10 years than in the previous 200. Well, during this same period, a lot has happened to our profession. A burgeoning population explosion has taken place and has transformed almost every large American city into overcrowded cesspools of political pollution, social pollution, and problems that seem to be insurmountable. The problems of the core cities are not shared by those of us who work in the city by day and then escape to the comfortable suburbs in the evening. The city really has been left to the new arrivals, people who have had to shift for themselves in finding housing, finding jobs, and finding education for their children. The diagnosis I draw may be slow death for the urban centers. The city will die unless we change our indifference and unconcern. Even the once beautiful, abundant countryside faces a similar fate. Driving out here, this is my second time in Indiana, you see examples not only here but all through the United States of ill-planned and irresponsible sensitivity or lack of sensitivity. And I think this irresponsibility threatens the very essential life systems that we used to take so much for granted. The toxic air that we sometimes cannot breathe and the rivers in which we can no longer swim are examples. Our green spaces appear to be diminishing rapidly, too rapidly. One sees it gobbled up by land speculators, followed by their inept, endless developments of row houses, sometimes with neo-mansard roof styles that you see all over the country, and with a wide range of materials, all with swimming pool and available for only 10% down. Is there any hope? If one observes the apathy of our political leaders, one has grave doubts. If one looks at a few courageous voices, some in the profession, and listens, supports, and implements some of their programs, I believe there is some encouragement. We as architects have aspired to create a better, man-made environment for all individuals. Through this, we expect to alleviate poverty, human suffering, and social injustice. Society can benefit only when we as a nation establish national priorities to put our own house in order with the appropriate funding, use of skills, and implementation strategies to cause things to happen. If our profession of architecture is indeed serious and dedicated to a commitment of creating a better environment, we must drastically adjust our attitudes and firmly commit ourselves to change, responsibility, leadership, and accountability. So I think that there are opportunities for you students to get involved, because I think you're the great hope. With such priorities, the profession needs to develop new competencies, new methods, and new associations to meet the challenge. Many multidisciplinary teams, skilled in large-scale planning, management, problem-solving, design, technology, and delivery systems will be required. We have a new element, the conservation of energy, which is critical in this country, which we've just discovered, which is another element to be concerned with. Now, these new priorities does not mean the extinction of the small practitioner. I think the small practitioner with a small force can participate and get involved. He can become involved in designing housing systems, undertaking research, developing health, transportation, and community facilities. And he may find it necessary to associate or form joint ventures with organizations, sometimes non-architectural, offering skills not supplied by his own firm. He may find opportunities to serve in government at the action level, at the community level, in decision-making, in planning, and possibly serve on redevelopment commissions, on housing authorities, and on design review boards. When I observe education, many architectural schools seem to be in the process of providing an education as contrasted to training, with the goal that students will be able to assume positions of responsibility 10 or 15 years from now. I maintain that this is too long a period to wait. It appears that present architectural education is not good enough for today's practice, and the general areas of competence of architects in practice, on the other hand, is not adequate enough for them to do a truly professional job. Students should be educated so that after a short period beyond graduation, they are capable and responsive to taking on major responsibilities. It is a pity that with the present inadequacies of internship and the lack of opportunities, that one is close to 40, not waste, 40 years old, before attaining a truly responsible position. Perhaps we can change this denial of talent. First, by defining the problem, and second, by outlining solutions, instead of waiting for the AIA or someone else to solve it. I might suggest that the schools and the leading firms work out an internship program with responsibility as a reward. I believe that Ball State, as a starter and with some hard work, could place each of its graduates with a leading firm within a monitored growth program beginning this year. And I said hard work. I think it's up to you, Dean and Jack and all these other able people. I believe our profession is changing rapidly, but many architects I find are not keeping pace and improving their own competence. They must to cope with these drastic changes that are underway. We cannot solve the complicated world problems with yesterday's thinking. For example, in the USA, there is presently a revolution taking place in construction. We build quite differently than we did 4, 5, 10 years ago. Architects have been challenged to build faster, cheaper, and better to cope with the new complex planning and design requirements. New techniques and competencies have been developed outside the profession. We must be knowledgeable of these new tools and understand their use. Model gaming techniques, construction management, computer design aids, systems technology, community development, social action, and urban design are indicative of the breadth and scope of what is demanded. Of course, all of these components can be effective in improving our design product and the total environment. Part 2 of my role is to tell you a little bit about my own firm, TAC. The Architects Collaborative, as Charlie said, TAC, was founded a great many years ago, back in 1945, when some of you were just mere babes. But I believe TAC is a great firm with many interesting and talented people, consisting of architects, urban designers, landscape architects, interior designers. The atmosphere in TAC is unique because there is no boss system. Larry Richards and Jack Wyman worked there for a long period of time, and we were very sorry to see them go. I must quote one of the 8 founding partners of TAC, Walter Gropius, who said way back in 1945, "By synchronizing all individual efforts, the team can raise its integrated work to higher potentials than is represented by the sum of the work of just so many individuals." With this statement as a guiding principle, 8 founding partners of TAC recognized at the offset, back in 45, that the complex problems facing the profession made the collaborative process essential. Not merely an assemblage of a team of specialists, collaboration is an attitude of how people should work together and towards what ends. Today, 4 of the original partners remain. There are 7 new principals, including myself, who carry on with new responses to new needs. Essential to this structure is a weekly meeting of the principals and associates to decide business policy and to review work in progress. Policy decisions that emerge from the weekly meetings are now implemented through the office of the president, who is elected for a 2-year term. Equally essential in TAC's approach is the firm's division into teams varying in number and composition, each working on a specific project. The intimate character of these semi-autonomous groups, headed by a principal, avoids the anonymity of persons and designs often associated with larger firms. For quality control, all projects receive review through the weekly design meetings of the principals and the associates. In order to preserve the artistic integrity of the team, criticisms with respect to design are not binding. The principal can take it or leave it. However, the responsible give and take within the design meetings seems to clarify and broaden the vision of team members. This design meeting process is one of the key elements of success in this firm. It has a number of advantages. It provides an overview for principals of all work in process in the office. It provides an interaction between the team members coming into the design meeting and the principals and vice versa. It provides an opportunity for staff to develop their ability to present ideas, both graphically and orally. It maintains, surprisingly, a high quality of design simply by coming into the meeting. And lastly, it subjects each project to critical analysis. It was really from a sense of urgency to solve problems on a large scale that TAC grew to its recent size of an office over 200 people. Had we remained small, I think we would have been barred from participation in today's major problems of health, education, government, transportation, housing, research, tourism, urban problems, and the environment. Solutions in these fields require the creative resources of many people. Moreover, the system of teams makes it possible to continue giving problems of smaller scale the same degree of personal attention and involvement. A mutual respect for each principal's interests has led to a wide variety of work here and abroad. Through all the changes since its founding back in '45, TAC intends that the spirit that guides its practice be continuous and reflect itself in a physical environment which advances the quality of human life. I'd like to now show you some case studies of the work of the collaborative. How's that? Well, the TAC built its own building 3 or 4 years ago, and this shows you the home office headquarters. And on the right is a cartoon of principals. I don't know how many, Rope wasn't here, but there are 11 now, including one woman who is not a token woman, Sarah Harkness, who is perhaps one of the best thinkers in the firm. The original design meeting on the right with Gropius in the center, John Harkness in the foreground, Norman Fletcher, and so forth, is a weekly key to teamwork in our office. The way TAC works is shown in this chart on the left. Is that in focus? Doesn't seem to be working, but the approach is simple. There's always a TAC principal in charge in the center column, and the team is composed of a variety of people, architects mainly, researchers, programmers, and so forth. The consultants on the left, the yellow boxes, might range from real estate, soil, structural systems, technical specialists, traffic, and so forth. All of this is coordinated by the principal and a job captain. How do ideas develop in TAC? In many projects, it depends on how the principal operates. Two teams might work on opposite poles, but it's his responsibility to bring the project and guide it into a decision-making form. TAC has a variety of people, male and female. The shot on the right is the interior as you come into our office. The casual atmosphere of the office is an assemblage of cells around with the various buildings with cubbies and exciting little groups putting models together or working out design problems. There always seems to be a going away party or a coming in party at TAC, and this is I think a going away party for someone. This was Jack Wyman when he had less hair on the left. I'm glad that the climate out here in this country produces such strength. Of course, Gropius was one of the great thinkers in our profession, and these slides were taken at his 85th birthday. You all know the man on the right, Larry Richards. He's changed a little, he's got better looking. But Grope was a humanist. I look upon his career as three distinct phases. His early work in Germany with Peter Behrens, his designs of the Vegas factory in 1911, and his early work as an educator in the Bauhaus, I would say would be phase one. Phase two was when he came to the U.S. and took on the chairmanship at Harvard, and I think many of his students set up so many schools around the country that he contributed so much in this area. And of course, phase three was his work with the collaborative. This is Isa Gropius, Walter's wife, taken at the 85th, Dr. Pusey on the left, and one of our founders on the right, Norman Fletcher, who was a great critic and worked closely with Jack Wyman and Larry Richards on the AIA building. John Harkness on the right doesn't wear this fedora all the time. This again is one of the founding principles. It was really a total architect. The gentleman on the left is Alex Ivanovich, one of the new principals and an exciting total architect involved with housing, tourism, and a wide range of things. Louis McMillan has done so much work on Baghdad University. On the right, he has been through 5 coups at the University of Baghdad, which we started design about 14 years ago, and is still in construction. One of the projects that I remember Grope most well for is his design of the total theater, which was a very unique idea. The plan on the right shows you a circular flat section which could be rotated, creating more intimate groupings between audience and stage. We have a recent project which is a fine arts center where, after doing a little research, I found that this idea was patented by a manufacturer, and he's selling these turntables to architects. And when the client asked me, he said, "I have the greatest ideas that I've seen in architecture for a decade." He showed me this turntable, and I said, "Well, that's Grope's idea. It was developed back in the 1926. But it's surprising how we give our ideas away. We are adapting this total theater to a study we're making on a fine arts center right now with 3 turntables which can be rotated clear around 360 degrees and create smaller enclosed spaces with steep step seating. It's surprising that this theater hasn't been used. Grope always wanted a commission where he could find a client who would allow him to develop this idea of total flexibility. By the way, this exhibit of Grope's work Dean Charles, is traveling around the country, and perhaps you might be interested in having this. It's a series of slides and panels that I think it's in the Midwest in Chicago here or someplace. I think you may be interested in considering having here at the school. The one thing that Grove left us was a measure of tolerance and this overwhelming enthusiasm for teamwork. I think it's the essence of our collaboration, where one mind cannot solve all the complicated problems of a project in an office. And I think that the collaborative spirit with consultants and the inner team and the partners themselves is the strength of an office, and many of us have much to learn from this. The people around the table, Ben Thompson was one of our founders standing. He has since left, is now has his own successful office. I found it a great blow when he did leave TAC, because he was extremely sensitive designer, sensitive to interiors, texture, space, and I worked with him on a number of projects. I mentioned earlier that there was a construction revolution in this country. For years we were doing a great number of schools, and the chart at the left shows you the cost situation in 1960 going up to last year or two ago, where escalation, high cost of materials, lack of productivity of labor, high cost of labor has pushed and escalated the simple elementary school from roughly $25 a square foot over here on the left in the 60s up to close to 40, 50. The research was obtained from looking at a number of our own projects and a number of other architects, and it proved that we had to do something to lick the system. And one of the approaches was to experiment with systems, parts. The chart on the left shows you on the system components the number of elements in a general contract which are less than the traditional building elements that you find if you build in the conventional way on the right part of this left-hand chart. So this was generated by a number of associates in the office who were concerned with this building with parts, and we experimented and did a lot of research on all the systems available, one of which is the componoform precast concrete system, which is composed of cruciform columnar shapes, precast beams, and planks. In doing public work for schools, you cannot use an exclusive system like this, and you have to bid projects competitively. So we had to design it twice for a variety of systems, and we ended up, this is our third school, of using precast elements and precast plank, and we ran into a great number of problems. Precast planks, in my opinion, are perhaps the only element, if you see one on the hoist here, that industry can support in mass volume. When you get into the columns and the beams, they're curing processes, they're forming processes, have much has to be done on them, because we had columns and beams that came through which were totally unacceptable. Even the planks have cambers in them, which require toppings. You have to pour a topping over the floor. So the idea developed that within the precast structural elements, that much had to be done on the environmental systems, the petitioning, all of the other components. The structure is only a small portion of any building, 10 to 12%. This shows you a completed project on the left. And the components are very simple. In education today, since educationists don't know what programs they'll be involved with in the future, flexibility and adaptability are extremely important. By that we mean you should be able to move a petition freely, and you should be able to move it without any great effort in obtaining electrification, communication, telephone, clock systems, things like this, heating, air, etc. The sketch on the right is the germ of the idea that we developed with some manufacturers. It's on a 5-foot by 5-foot grid, and we made a model mock-up on the left which shows you this, in which petitions can be plugged in at any 5-foot point, light can be secured, air can be secured from the ribs at the 5 feet point, and you have this free movement of space. With the cooperation of the manufacturer, we had a system built and tested. The sketch on the right shows you the versatility, at least in schools, in trying to find an answer to build faster, better, and cheaper. These petitions were plug-ins that could be secured to the floor, the carpet by pressure, a rubber gasket, and secured into a little slot in the ceiling and taken down just as easily without buildings and grounds, great effort, or having a mechanic come in to move it. The finished product is on the left, and the sketch on the right shows you how the components are assembled. Simply an aluminum raceway for air, for communication, and I'll show you these components that make up the system. First, the space division accessories include walls, chalkboards, storage units that can come into a space, be secured and locked, and taken down with great ease or moved. The structural elements are not really structure, but it's a bone, a fabric, with a 5-foot module which fits nicely within the accessory shown in one. Lighting on the right is an important component, and so is the sound controls. The panels around the lights are acoustical. The air distribution is fed by flexible ducts that you see coming out of the main trunk duct to the slots and to this little hopper duct that goes into any module. The electronics system, the lighting, the communication, the speakers, the audio, video can also be run through and tapped at any point. The panel on the right shows you the teacher's panel, which has communication, TV, lighting, communication to office, etc., in a stock panel that we've designed that fits right into the wall. So I think that on a very simple elementary school basis, this was one answer to finding areas of building faster and simpler. Taking this idea to a much more complicated approach, we've been involved with a master planning of a teaching hospital at the University of Minnesota, which is about $86 to $100 million, and we've been involved with it about 5 years. To solve the problems of this complex campus, which had existing buildings that had to be tied into the new elements, a variety of approaches were taken, but our office, and I'm sure you're exposed to this kind of thinking, of analyzing the system before you draw a line. The chart on the right gathering data and defining the goals and specifying and implying design criteria takes a lot of research. In defining the client's problems, the relationship with the client, the delivery system, the PERT schedule, or critical planning event technique, is one where the greatest advantage is seeing every element, seeing the breadth and scope of your undertaking, seeing the total project on paper. And it's a process that many firms have developed in analyzing significant problems. The University of Minnesota has a number of existing buildings, and the new elements shown in white on the right model had to be interconnected by communication systems, pedestrian and vehicular systems. Down near the river, there is a central delivery, storage, and distribution system and parking system, which will ultimately feed to the new and existing buildings. In looking at these relationships, we discovered that by networks and different vector coloring techniques, that this kind of idea could be supported, and the new elements that were shown on the model were closely related to the dotted line down at the bottom of the right-hand slide, which shows you the distribution of material, circulation, and so forth. The basic science network of facilities, the service on the left-hand slide, shows you where the new center for parking and distribution would be, and the goals, criteria, alternatives, evaluation, and so forth is just a feedback to test out design ideas, location of services, and strategies. Obviously, a subsystem of building had to be designed for this large complex. It had to recognize the structural, the environmental systems. It had to have the movement of partitions. It had to have all of the elements that you saw in the smaller school that I showed you earlier. And it had to it had to be a system which could provide for change in use, change in dimension, and change in environment. It also had to meet the criteria of budget. It also had to meet the criteria of time. And it also had to keep intact the present facilities. On the left is an early sketch of the massing of these components, which I'll show you how we arrived at them. The ability to change, the speed, the other qualities on the right are manifested by this building systems framework here on the left. The basic module is 14 foot 4 inches around these shafts, and there's roughly 49 foot 4 between the shafts. There's a whole structural mechanical strata that allows air and ducts through ducts, electrical power to go through a underfloor duct system. The 4 shaftways are really wet walls all the way up through the buildings, where you can get any kind of mechanical, electrical, or energy source. Within this space, this midway between these shafts is an intermediate pier, which, I don't know if that's working. Can you focus the one on the left a little better? How about the one on the left? well, obviously the four shaftways, the structural strata, the ceiling strata underneath, all provided this speed of construction, simplicity of design, simplicity of shop fabrication, and eliminated special conditions. Stairway components and elevators up in the upper right-hand corner could logically be placed in the solid core area. In the structural analysis, various goals, criteria, and alternatives were looked at, and the sketch on the right shows you the essence of the structural system, which is a series of steel trusses to which you can run almost anything. And it provides you a space about 4 feet 4, and the clear space could range from about 9 to 10 feet clear ceiling, floor to ceiling. Likewise, the HV air conditioning subsystem had to be examined in performance goals, criterias, alternatives, and the sketch on the right shows you how this has been accomplished. Within these spaces, laboratories, and so forth, air had to be withdrawn through fume hoods. Piping had to be available for certain sinks and lab benches. All of this was tied together with a development schedule of starting at a certain period and completion of construction, which led us to fast-tracking a very complicated project. And by fast-tracking, we mean building in stages. We examine the total project, which is quite harmonious, I believe, the new elements related to the existing buildings. It met the construction costs, it met the criteria, it met the performance standards, and the next step was to dig a hole, which we did, and supervise the construction management of this. We had the wall shored and ordered the steel about a year in advance of when it was actually detailed. So the whole project is underway now, and it indicates, I think, some of the complexities of, very briefly, of looking at a systems approach to building buildings. This is a very romantic project in Yugoslavia. One of my partners, Alex Ivanovic, is Yugoslavian. He came to this country right after the war. He gets along well with the client, but it just shows you how we work. Will you focus one here on the left just a bit, please? These are two distinctly different schemes for a tourism, a small tourist complex in a valley south of Dubrovnik in Yugoslavia. It has a wonderful beach and swimming. The one on the left is closely knitted to the beach with a man-made canal, and the one on the right is clustered to the mountaintops and the edges of the hills. The one on the right didn't work out because of the problems in access, the problems in construction cost and blasting, and a great variety of reasons. The one on the right is the one that was selected to go ahead. And we tried to find something that was simpatico to the Yugoslavian climate, the Yugoslavian architecture. I drove from one end of Yugoslavia to the southern end, and I found that high-rise and inept architecture was ruining the countryside. And we felt that indigenous materials with tile roofs would be the answer. And I think these are some of the sketches that show you our approach to building in a foreign country. We're not using the Minnesota approach here. These are for Europeans, Yugoslavians, Northern Europeans, to spend 3 or 4 months of the year at a seaside resort at very low cost, exposed to the beach, the sun. The whole valley is a series of dikes The farms will be retained. In Yugoslavia, there is one client, the government, which makes it easy for the architects. These show you our concept of pulling water, which has to be taken off the slopes. Would you adjust those, please? And to closely relate the tourist villas with the water edge. We wanted to have paved piazzas and walkways that somehow preserve the scale of this fantastic site. The Market Street, the little shops, the wine shop are all part of this this concept. This shows you on the left the canal approach to the market square. The climate in the southern part of Yugoslavia is fantastically mild, which allows us to use the outdoor for dining and recreation. Here's a project that we have just recently completed, which is a general hospital in Montego Bay, Jamaica, for 400 beds to serve 120,000 people on the island. On the right, the lower base, which is 3 stories, has the general administrative government outpatient. The tall 10-story link is the nursing wing, and the pediatrics element is in the center. The buildings at the rear and on the plan at the right are the residential units for nurses, interns, and doctors, which step down the heavily green site. And one of them has been built, and the other 6 or 7 are going ahead in the near future. There is no air conditioning in Jamaica. The corridors are open. The temperature is extremely mild and doesn't vary a great deal. And it's quite interesting to do a building this magnitude in this kind of climate. The small windows on the top are a psychiatric area. The little band above midway is a balcony, which is open for access to the various linkages. We did a project out here on the prairie in Des Moines, Iowa, which, unlike Kevin Roach's pyramids, we try to hug the ground. We keep focusing those, they seem to be going out of, one on the right is a little out. It's a project on a dead flat site for the Meredith Corporation, which is a nationally known magazine publisher. The plan on the right shows you the fixed zones with the air units on the roof and the plain white elements of the office areas. They intend to build roughly half of this space and expand at the bottom of the sheet with roughly 50% expansion. The method of handling the traffic, the pedestrians, the service, had to be carefully worked out. And the elevation on the right indicates a very low silhouette with dining, public areas on the first floor, offices on the second and third, and service and utility and pedestrian tunnels underneath on the lower areas. This shows you on the right the idea of the fixed zones versus the office areas, which are completely flexible, similar to schools. The problem of working out in advance a systematic process of defining their spatial problems was interesting because, as a result, the Meredith Corporation created a whole new organizational structure of interrelationships between departments that spawned a new approach to planning facilities, their facilities at least. And I think this somewhat scientific effort in planning, in defining the problem, you'll see very much more of in firms. I don't know, Charlie, if you're using this at the school, but it's a method of predicting, defining solutions much better than in the intuitive old hat way. These simply are impact sketches showing on the right the kind of lobby two-story thing that we suggested, and a typical office environment on the left with open partitions, office landscaping. This is a project that Jack Wyman worked on. It's the AIA headquarters in Washington, which has just been recently completed, and Larry Richards also worked on it. The old building was a complete inadequate facility on the right. The AIA had spent a great deal of money in restoring the famous octagon to its original position. The little diagrams on the right show you the site relationships between the pedestrian, the after-hours public, and the vehicular accesses to the octagonal building, the octagon. As you know, TAC was selected as architects after the winners of the competition resigned. And they resigned because they couldn't get the project through the Fine Arts Commission of the District of Columbia. A search was made by the AIA to interview architects, and our firm was selected. When we took the job, we asked ourselves, why should we design a building for architects? There are 22,000 members of the AIA, and all we'll get is criticism. But we have done the building, and there are a couple of things that we thought of the original approach, which weren't done. The site plan on the left shows you indications that we looked at the total block of the AIA headquarters. We looked beyond the building site, and we had hoped that we could create some pedestrian malls and plazas by influencing the buildings that were next to the AIA headquarters, and perhaps develop a whole block with some interesting spatial relationships. For some reason or another, this was not done. I think it was purely financial. Developers came in and have built tightly around the AIA headquarters, so that today we don't have this grand idea of creating some interesting interrelationships between new massing and the AIA building, but we have buildings that come right up around it. This is quite interesting. The original concept was a isosceles grid, reinforced concrete exposed, which all the systems related to air, light, acoustics, and so forth. It had this thing, the isosceles grid disappeared when the bids came in. We had to go back to a conventional ribbed ceiling, which broke some of our hearts. I think it'll be a good building, however. The model on the left shows you how it looks now. The projecting element next to the octagon near these red paved gardens is the boardroom of the AIA. the center focus is a diagonal right where the two elements meet dead center, and it's related axially to the octagon building. One of the requirements of our client was that the garden space be retained in the old smokehouse with sort of the green roof, which was. And I'm happy to report, I just saw it last week, that the trees are growing, new trees are growing, and the whole garden has been enriched, and the spatial relationship comes off very, very well. The AIA expects to take about 3 floors. They hope that they will rent out 2 or 3 floors on short-term leases to related clients or related groups such as ACSA. The National Council is going in the building, possibly NAAB, and with expansion they can move into that space in the future. It's a simple building. All the vertical circulation is up in the right-hand corner. The stairs on each end. The typical floor plan of the main boardroom is on the left, which shows you a circular arrangement for the AIA Board of Directors. Down on the other end is our executive offices and general office space. And they hope to entice the profession to come here and use it more often. And I think it's a good platform, a good area to be used for meetings, for seminars, for discussions. This is one of Howard Elkis's sketches that shows you the main stair going up to the boardroom level as you come in the lobby. It's a very bold, vertically high, elegant space. The triangular sections are gone, but the strength of space still remains. The relationship with the octagon is essential. This building had to receive the Fine Arts Commission approval and planning board approval in Washington. I believe it'll be a successful facility for the architects. This shows you how we tied in the use of materials. The building is concrete, but the brick paving used in the walkways here relates very closely to the octagon. So I think it does tie in very nicely with the walls and the old building. Binghamton Housing is in New York State. We had a client, Ed Logue, who used to be the redevelopment director in Boston, who wanted something like 400 units of housing at very low cost in stage 1, and roughly the same amount in stage 2. We have about 15 landscape architects in our office who work closely with us. One of the things they do quite well, among other things, is to analyze the site, to analyze its access, its site exposure, and this is a very good technique of seeing where you might build and where you cannot build. The feasible building areas on the left show you the light green open lands, the darker brown wooded areas, and then the steep terrain flowing away. So the buildable areas are obviously up to the left and down the bottom. On the right, this is a slope analysis which show you the grades of slopes by color. The deep brown are very 20% plus of slope, which are relatively unbuildable. The master plan shows you the two entities. The one on the left is phase 1, which is already completed, and the bottom one is in construction. One of the ideas here was to have open space, which is in abundance down here, but to have community areas and play spaces interspersed with the housing units. And we worked out a design. There are 2-bedroom 3s and 4s that we had hoped could be 3-dimensional pretty well. The industry, again, could not make these. I know in certain parts of the country they are, but this is how it was designed, and they're using pre-cut and panel systems. We had hoped that these units could have been fabricated and brought out to the site. This is the finished product of these very low-cost units. Which range from $19,000 to $20,000 each, including site work. So the budget had to be pretty tight. We did use 3-dimensional components in the kitchen, heating elements, and in the baths. Those are readily available today, so you can just plug them in. The units sit nicely on the hill, and we've just been awarded another, well, this past year we're going forward with phase 2. This is 236, low cost, low income. It's about the bottom financial dollar of the housing market. But it does provide a variety of people an opportunity to live in some exciting exposures, exciting vistas. Project in Boston. It just won the Halston Parker Medal several weeks ago, which is the top award given by the Boston Society for a project within the city limits. This is the Children's Hospital Medical Center, where we've been working over 12 years. And the first project that was developed was a motel, bank, residential tower, which is down here in the foreground. The famous Children's Hospital has visitors from all over the world, and parents come, stay with their children in the motel, which is this 2-story link above the commercial areas below. And the children are treated as outpatients, as opposed to the old way of leaving the child and the parent going off. Another interesting commendation of this, it received at the convention last year a National Honor Award for its design, and particularly the urban design aspects of the whole project. The 2 shafts, the heating plant, power plant, is being removed from this complex, but it's a very dense, very urban situation. The residential towers flow upward over the motel unit, and there are facilities such as banks and shops for them. These are the interiors of some of the buildings, the waiting areas. They're very simple vocabulary, quarry tile pavers, exposed concrete painted with incandescent light. We're back on a school at the Cape Cape Cod, Massachusetts, where it all started. This is the area where the Pilgrims first came to our country, and this is a regional school that was completed about a year ago on a fantastic, wonderful open site of 72 acres. This part of the Cape in Massachusetts gets very little snow, and the climate is rather mild in the winter. It gets the benefit of the Gulf Stream. The site plan suggests open circulation between areas. On the right slide, the squarish building in the foreground is the resource center, which is in administration, which is central. To the right is science. Above that is teaching classrooms. Diagonally across from the resource center is a 600-seat divisible auditorium that can be subdivided into 3 areas by moving coil walls. To the right is kitchen, cafeteria, and a huge field house, which has the equivalent of 3 standard university-sized basketball courts. And north of it is the industrial arts wing. The circulation is outdoors. There are no corridors in this school. The diagram on your right shows you how access works between buildings and by means of stairs between classroom groupings. You can either go up or down on a split level, which is related to the rolling terrain. Another unique thing is that all of the scrub pines here were existing, and great effort was taken to preserve them. It's a building of reinforced concrete which is sandblasted. It has block walls faced with western red cedar, which give it a rather small-scale Cape Cod look. It provides wonderful spaces for interaction among students. The walls are designed so that the student can sit on them. And I think that the students and the staff are fascinated with this new school of theirs. Divisible auditorium on the right, that vertical slot which you see over in the far right, contains a door a folding coil wall door, which is the best of folding doors. It's wood slats, and just by moving a button, it can retract or close off a space. The stage is a thrust stage. I was at opening day ceremonies here, and the acoustics to architects, if they work successfully, is superb. And in back of me, there was a 35-piece school orchestra, and there were no microphones. And the configuration of the space was that just by normal voice, you could speak very effectively and be heard, and people in the audience could also speak and be heard just as well. That's how it was designed, and it was a success. The resource center is on the left. It's the one grand space, 2 stories. It has a very simple expression of 4-foot grids, painted concrete on the inside. Carpeting goes throughout. The administrative link at the balcony is above. It provides a very harmonious addition to the Cape. Classroom units had a one-way rib slab in which fluorescent lighting was placed on every 4th rib, and acoustical tiles secured to the underside of the slabs and the vacant coffers. The teachers' units and all the cabinetry was metal prefabricated in modular. And the trouble with furnishings, in schools at least, is that architects don't really get involved with it too much. It's bid competitively, and what we generally do is pick the colors and try to keep our client from picking a too grotesque line of material. These oaks and pines in the center were retained, and to preserve the landscaping was certainly worthwhile. This is a unique project done down in Carlisle, Pennsylvania for Dickinson College. We were engaged 3 years ago to do some master planning for them and to develop a multi-purpose auditorium, theater, and fine arts center. The building on the left has been completed. The Fine Arts and Music Center has not. This is a performing center for the arts. It's phase one. We kept an overzealous administration from building this in the wrong place, because they had this building suggested for an area which was just the wrong site to be selected. They had the funds, they had the money to go. They checked with us, and we said, would you allow us to look at the overall aspects? We'd like to just carefully see if this is the right place, and we found out that there was a better relationship to a student union and more of the activities. They had it off across the street. It was inaccessible, and sometimes this happens. You don't know the power of your own persuasion. Could we focus those, please? These show you the early diagrams that we wanted to create a space that was exciting and flexible, that solved all the functional requirements of access and egress, which is so important, safety of the public, provided lobby space and green rooms, and yet did something unusual for the performing arts in showing slides. And this configuration, this three-pronged configuration over the space, was the area in which was a series of catwalks, and through which lighting, sound, and projection equipment could be placed, where you could develop a whole variety of possibilities. And here's the end product. It was, in effect, you have a variety of possibilities here to have a center stage or a stage at one end. And here again, we did some work with the Ford Foundation in developing almost an absolutely sound, secure partition. And we used a double coil wall, which again is in the vertical shaft, and can subdivide this area into a number of smaller spaces. The building has the appearance of scale, simpatico with the other buildings around it. The space inside, when it's opened up, is quite impressive and exciting. I think this gives you an idea of what you can do. You can have an ensemble in the center. The stage can be removed, put in the center, or taken out. You can have a whole theater in the round, a whole variety of possibilities. And it just perhaps overemphasizes flexibility, but this is one of the key issues in a program such as this. The lobby had to be somewhat impervious to moisture and little maintenance, but yet warm. We carried the wood outside, around the stairs, up the concrete stairs, on the balcony, to break down the scale and give it a feeling of warmth. The lighting is a little different, somewhat related to performances. It creates a pleasant atmosphere. Concrete is severely sandblasted, exposing the aggregate which is what I suggest they do to the pyramids out here. Ending up, if you are up in Cambridge, it's pretty hard to explain in an hour or so your beliefs, your approaches. This is the second phase of our building. This is our logo. We have, as I said, a variety of people from all over the world. Do you recognize the people on the right? No, but you do on the left. We have the latest and most modern conveniences. If you graduates come with us, you'll be treated well. And we also allow a clothes allowance to people with 5 years tenure in the firm. The last thing here is just a contrast between the Cape site that we did the school on and what's happening to our cities. And I'd like to close with just reminding you that the total environment is so very important to our future. Thank you.
I'm sure that Mr. Geddis would answer any questions.
Well, the configuration of the strata in Yugoslavia was granulated. It was from borings and test pits. You couldn't build on it. It was just a granulated limestone that was fractured. And it would have necessitated, I think, premiums on the substructures, obviously. The other thing was that when you go to a place like Yugoslavia, you want an exposure to the beach and to the water. The hillside scheme, half of the rooms were turning inward, like the little Italian hillside towns. And the client felt that a view was a given, a very important requirement. Well, I don't believe in absolutes. I didn't say that our landscape architect said slopes were undesirable to build on. I think what I should have said was that the slopes are quite steep at Binghamton. And when you look at the circulation and the vistas, you wouldn't want to build on that green bowl, that glacial bowl. No, I don't believe in any absolutes like that. We work with landscape architects, and sometimes many times they persuade us, obviously. But in Yugoslavia, it was such a severe problem based on cost and I think orientation that the hillside scheme, which I like better than the valley scheme, couldn't be. I wanted to keep the valley open forever. When you come down to that valley, I thought it should be kept open. I still think it should have been. I would have liked the hillside scheme. Any more questions? Could I ask you a question? How many are going into the profession of architecture when you get through school? That's a good sign. Well, maybe someday our paths will meet.